A search for God expanded. 6. Fellowship. A search for God Lesson 6. Fellowship. Introduction. Am I my brother's keeper? Our fellowship with God. Fellowship with God, the need of the world. Duty of those who have fellowship with the Father. Fellowship brings a peace that passes understanding. Introduction. If we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another. Affirmation. How excellent is thy name in the earth, O Lord! Would I have fellowship with thee, I must show brotherly love to my fellow man. Though I come in humbleness and have aught against my brother, my prayer, my meditation, does not rise to thee. Help thou my efforts in my approach to thee. Introduction. In preparation for the task before us, let us become more conscious of the divine spirit within, that we may go on. May we face the issues before us as those called for a purpose. May we rely on his promises. For while we are often weak and selfish, and the work is great, he will encourage our spirits, our hearts, with the presence of his Holy Spirit, so that there may be no idleness or delay in us. The spark of the divine, that is forever seeking its source, is within each of us. As we develop our spiritual forces, our soul forces within, we fan this spark into a flame, which brings realization of our oneness and fellowship with the Creator of all things. There is a longing in our hearts for this fellowship, an urge driving us hither and thither in search of happiness and satisfaction, onward in search of God. In the beginning, all knew a perfect fellowship with the Father, and in the knowledge and understanding of this fellowship all walked and talked with God. Again, this same fellowship is offered to all, a promise of the Father, through the Son. It is the reflection of this fellowship which expresses itself in our love for our fellow human beings, whom we innately feel to be one with us as part of the all-inclusive whole. As we manifest love toward our neighbor, we increase or awaken our consciousness to a more complete fellowship with the Father, and we more fully realize that he moves within others as he moves within us. The family of humankind is but a shadow of fellowship with the Father. It is a true expression of the fellowship that exists in spirit. The Edgar Cayce Readings. 1. Introduction. I try to keep in tune with the great I Am, all the time. What can I do to get closer to I Am? How can I get clearer guidance? How can I work closer with the great within, as directed by my previous reading? As given, and as in the activity of every individual, the way is open, ever. That is a natural heritage of each soul. Then, the practice of same, the application of same in the daily dealings, in the daily relationships, these bring within themselves that consciousness, and that attunement wherein there may be the greater awareness of the I Am and the directing of self and self's abilities, and self's clarifying self in those directions. See. I want to serve I Am, in the best way possible, and any help along this line will be followed implicitly. What shall I do? Interrupting, this, as we have indicated, is to be achieved day by day, here a little, there a little, line upon line, precept upon precept. Not as rote, but rather as a living experience that becomes so much the portion of self that it is felt, seen, known by all who may meet the body in its daily activities. A kind word, a gentle speech, even under the most trying circumstance, creates not only for self that attunement, but makes same for others, or makes others aware of same. This may be illustrated to the conscious mind by how the radio may be changed high or low, or to the perfect accord, and thus bring a unison that makes for not only perfect reception, but perfect reaction upon those affected by same. What is thy purpose? As we find, in defining then for the entity those questions, there must first be the purport, there must be the answer only within self, as to whom you will serve. Is it God or man? Is it self or fame or fortune? Are there those grounds for common meeting of these influences? For as the teacher of teachers gave, as all who have pointed to a service to their fellow men, there is one God, or the Lord thy God is one. And the expression should be, my spirit, not spirits, but my spirit, beareth witness with thy spirit, not spirits, as to whether ye be the child of God or not. Hence during that experience the entity became aware of the brotherly love that might be manifested even by one considered as a religious enemy. The entity gained a lesson from same. Though it may be said that the entity was overzealous during the early portion of its activity, it gained that lesson of brotherly love which aided the entity not only in the foreign land, but in its own homeland, in bringing a better understanding. In the present, from the lesson gained in that sojourn, we find the ability to apply, not by might or power, but by my word, gentleness, kindness, long-suffering, patience. Those things called the fruit of the Spirit, or having within them the spirit of the creative forces or energies we call God. In such a manner, as to bring into the hearts and experiences of others the knowledge of the oneness of soul's relationships to the Godhead. Only in the fruits of the Spirit, as of long-suffering and patience and mercy and brotherly love and kindness and gentleness, may the true meaning of life's experience and the purposes of life, and in the associations with others, be understood. And not as tenets, but as practical application of same in thy daily life, with thy daily experience with thy fellow man. These make for that in the experience of each soul that makes life, with all of its uprisings and downsittings, worthwhile. 4. As ye have so oft played a part in the changing world that has come about in the sojourns through the earth's plane, so may ye find thy activities in the present sojourn among peoples and conditions, in which is there coming about a changing world. Thus, be ever as a messenger, as an entity or individual that makes known the ways of the Lord. Not as one that would be long-faced, or that would separate self from others so much. 4. Be even as he, who was known among those of every estate, dining with those who dined, weeping with those who wept, among the poor to cherish them, among the rich to give that is needed for their activities among their fellow men. So may ye in thy mission, and in thy journey among thy fellow men, meet, know, have a part in this great, changing world in the present. What can I contribute to the freedom of India and the brotherhood of man? This is a large order, my brother. The brotherhood of man, preach it ever. Oh, that man would gain the understanding in his heart of this universality of the truth, that man is his brother's keeper. Then may there be the awakening within each soul of the necessity of its giving expression to those in every walk of life. As to the uplift of India, that in which it has been and is so oft misunderstood, the entity's greater contribution may be to the world as to the truths that India holds and has held that the world so much needs, in its mad rush for the expression of the desires of the flesh. For these have and do become disturbing periods because the author of The Age of Reason, Thomas Paine, was an associate and a companion of the entity as David Levitt, who argued with and brought to the formers of a government of the people, for the people and by the people, a realization of the need for trust to man seeking to be helpful to his fellow man. And these principles were inculcated into the Declaration, as these individuals reasoned with Jefferson, as he prepared same. As is set forth in the preamble, as is interpreted in the Declaration of Freedom, these are principles which are eternal, those same set forth by those, through which the hope of the world must come, which all men must recognize if they are to live together as brethren. Not that all need be of one mind, but on one purpose and one hope, each loving his neighbor as himself. How may I best help to fulfill what Jesus taught in regard to helping people understand that we must love all races, colors and creeds? As indicated in the admonition as we have outlined for the entity. Know that the authority is established, or know the author of thy faith and of thy ideals. Then apply same. The influences from the sojourns of the entity in Jupiter have made for the broad expanse of associations and relations, and those activities of individuals with whom the entity has been associated deal with things of large fields that have a great influence upon the lives and manners of living of many individuals. Yet these with their adverse influences have made for times when the entity has withdrawn within itself, through those very fears that have arisen from the adverse Venus experience. Yet, whether the abilities and the activities may be in the relationships of letters, or of writing, or the experiencing of the judgments, as in the relationships of groups or masses or classes, ever would the entity judge rather for the other fellow than for self. 4. Not only through its sojourns in the earth, but in the environmental influences about the earth, the entity has gained the virtues of patience and tolerance. If these are kept in that same attitude in which the entity has thus far experienced in its application of that it has attained respecting the creative forces in the material and in the mental world, they will bring happiness and joy in the very activities that will shut away, will mark from the entity's experience all of sorrow and sadness. 4. As has been given, he that loveth his brother may indeed through patience become aware of his soul and its activity in even material things. For the entity having endured even from the beginnings may know, even as he has given. Hence from this urge we will find manifested in this entity's experience in the present that of brotherly love, the thought of others. Yet, in a manner, capable of expressing or manifesting self in such a way as to influence the activities of others, but of an unselfish nature. The greater influence, then, in the experience of the entity, is that of selflessness. This is a virtue that needs to be magnified more in the abilities which naturally arise from this urge. As an organizer of specific or special activity. As a writer, or a lecturer, organizing definite thought or purpose. These then only need to be tempered with that more of the brotherly love. First, know what is thy ideal, spiritually, mentally, materially. Know they must be dependent one upon the other. Just as the faith of thy fathers is dependent upon the mercy, the love of God the Father. Just as the adherence to those principles interpreted in the material relationships brings harmony and peace and prosperity. 4. These are one, if they are bound together in brotherly love. Hence the entity has thus enjoyed, and does enjoy in its experience among its fellow men, not only respect, not only worshipfulness and respect, but love. Love that maketh the world of men's affairs more harmonious, that puts away hate from the heart and mind. Thus the entity attempts to give that activity into the experiences of others in such a way and manner that they, too, may know the freedom that such brings in its experience. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? Thousands of years ago there arose a question in humanity's heart, am I my brother's keeper? It is still being asked. Until this is fully answered in our hearts in God's way and put into practice in our lives, we cannot hope to have the fellowship that is our rightful heritage. When we fail to reach the mark of the high calling that is realized in service, we endeavor to justify ourselves by making the old inquiry, only to receive the answer, the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. No wonder we are miserable and cast down, and have fears that paralyze our efforts. Is it not because we know in our hearts that sin lies at our door? Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. God gives only love to his children and pities them even as earthly parents pity their children. It is only when we sever relationship from divine love by failing to suffer with our fellow humans, to bear their burdens, and to forgive them, that we are out of harmony and sympathy with all that makes life worth living, fellowship with the Father. Have we not at some time realized this? If we would be in a position to commune with the Spirit within, and if we would seek to know his face, then let us be kind and gentle, compassionate, and loving to others less fortunate. Manifesting love for our neighbor is manifesting love for God, in whom we live and move and have our being. We are enjoined not merely to ignore the shortcomings of our neighbors, but to love them in spite of their shortcomings, and to show such faith in the power of the Spirit within them that they will catch our vision, and in time come to realize their strength and seek to rise to higher planes of consciousness. We need not flatter them, or lead them to overestimate their strength. Rather, we should help them to understand themselves and to know that they have a friend who will stand by in time of need, one who will extend a hand if they are about to fall into temptation. This answers the whole duty of humanity to humanity, of neighbor to neighbor, and of the individual to his or her Maker, for inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. The test is this: are we willing to deal with others as we wish them to deal with us? May we ever be bound together in service to others through the fellowship which we have in Him. The Edgar Cayce readings. 2. Am I my brother's keeper? Does mankind consider he is indeed his brother's keeper? And this is the manner in which man may answer the question. There will be no wanton bread for mankind when mankind eventually realizes he is indeed his brother's keeper. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the bounty in one land is lent to man to give his brother. Who is his brother? Our Father. Then each of every land, of every color, of every creed is brother of those who seek the Father, God. This instill as ye interpret. Be faithful to the trust given thee. Let that rather be thy watchword: I am my brother's keeper. Who is thy brother? Whoever, wherever he is, that bears the imprint of the Maker in the earth, be he black, white, grey or grizzled, be he young, be he Hottentot, or on the throne or in the president's chair. All that are in the earth today are thy brothers. Those that have gradually forgotten God entirely have been eliminated, and there has come, now, and will come at the close of this next year, the period when there will be no part of the globe where man has not had the opportunity to hear, the Lord, He is God. And, as has been indicated, when this period has been accomplished, then the new era, the new age, is to begin. Will ye have a part of it, or will ye let it pass by and be merely a hanger-on, or one upon whom your brother, the Lord, thy Christ, may depend? Remember, He has given thee father, mother, home, opportunity, possibilities that are within thine own grasp now. And the meanest, the littlest man in the world is one who is unappreciative of what has been done, what is being done. That is why man, when he forsakes God, feels so low, becomes so little in his own sight. There will be offered those conditions wherein the entity will be able to make large quantities of money, large quantities of money. The entity will do well to see that the resources, however, of these, and from which these monies would come, is not at the expense of those of his fellow man, of whom there may be in after time, that required of the entity as of the blood of his brother crying from the ground. For nothing happens by chance. There may be opportunities for thee, not only to help others, but to be helped by others. For all that ye may ever keep is just what you give away, and that you give away is advice, counsel, manner of life you live yourself. The manner in which you treat your fellow man, your patience, your brotherly love, your kindness, your gentleness. That you give away, that is all that ye may possess in those other realms of consciousness. And then when an entity attains to the realm of the physical consciousness, such as these may bear fruit in thy life, in thy associations with others. Yet when the entity came under the influence of the healing of body, of mind, seeing hope and love, brotherly kindness and gentleness and patience shown among those where turmoils and strifes so often arose, it, as many another, joined with those activities, as Emilio. And as the entity aided those peoples in separating the various tenets for the application of the various groups who journeyed through that particular land, the entity grew in grace, in knowledge, in understanding. Just so in the present, as the entity applies the seed of the Spirit, patience, faith, hope, love, gentleness, kindness, it may see the fruit thereof in its own environs as well as in the activities of others. For know, ye can only labor in the vineyard of thy Lord, thy God. He alone may give thee increase. Who then is thy Lord? Who is thy God? What is thy belief? Who is the author of same? And unless it is founded, as in the experiences then, as in the experiences later, in the creative forces which arise from his desire that each soul would know its maker, and become a companion to that which is the creative force, knowing itself to be itself and as the Son, one with him, then it is not constructive. In the experience then the entity gained much knowledge as to judgments of peoples, as to their purposes, their abilities, and the ways and manners to encourage them through helpful suggestions that each soul or entity feels arise from within self. For to help one to help himself is greater than giving, without the ability of the one receiving to see. Hence as indicated, it is better to give than to receive. For only that ye have given do ye possess. Please give me some counsel and advice regarding my home that will help me to carry on. As indicated, first the harmony sought must be within self. And then, when you are sure of yourself, call those about you, not as a law, as an edict, but as a desire for the creating of the harmony, not that you hope for, but that you have within yourself. This will make, build and create harmony in the others. And we will get much more cooperation than otherwise. Just remember, you catch flies with honey, not vinegar. Keep the mental in the attitude of constructive forces. See in every individual the body contacts, that which is hopeful, helpful. See good in every one. Do not look for others' faults, but rather for their virtues, and the virtues in self will become much more magnified. For that we think upon, that we become. In our mental world we create, that which is manifested in our spiritual, as well as our material conditions. Hence in thy activity, minimize faults, condemnations, of others and of self. Magnify the virtues. For these are to be made into the glory of him, who hath indeed shown the way. Give me any other advice, which would aid me at this time. Keep the mental attitude in that of a constructive nature. Find not fault with others. For these but magnify thine own shortcomings, as in the eyes and minds of others. Let thy watchword rather be, that as the Lord hath need of me, may I in humbleness of mind be used as a channel of blessings to others. May that I think, do, be in accord with that I would have thought of and done to me by others. And it is only as ye deal with thy fellow man, that ye show forth his love. For as ye do it unto the least of these, thy brethren, ye do it unto thy Maker. Our fellowship with God. Our fellowship with God. If we wish to know how we stand with God, let us examine ourselves and see how we feel toward our neighbor. This companionship that we are seeking with God is found in the friendliness we show our neighbor. It is evident that our actions, our words, and our thoughts indicate too plainly our failure to seek fellowship with the Father. Let us examine ourselves, that we may know what is buried in our hearts and minds that may be blinding us or binding us. And if we have anything against another, let us pray for forgiveness, knowing that his mercy is sufficient for all. Seek God where he may be found, even in the heart of a neighbor. How well do we know God? Just as well as we seek to know and understand our fellow human beings, and just as well as we seek to magnify the divine consciousness in them. Do we seek far for the divine in this direction? Do we not judge our neighbors from appearances rather than by righteous judgment? Do we not often overlook the motive which may have prompted their misconduct? Do we realize that deep down in the heart of our neighbors there lies buried a celestial fire that burns ever before the altar of our God? Then let us seek them out and, in spite of the rebuffs that we may receive, love them, not for what they appear to be, but for what they really are. Not because they are human and need our sympathy, but because within them there is the divine that merits our adoration. What is more beautiful than fellowship? The Master sought it, that he might do the works of God. He did not withdraw from people, but mingled with them, sharing their sorrows, living their lives, and relieving their sufferings. We cannot hope to emulate his example, however, unless we abide in the Spirit that gives the strength. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. The Master taught that love and service go hand in hand. What greater love could he have shown than to lay down his life in service for his fellow human beings? Yet that is just how far the Master went to demonstrate his power over sin, death, and the grave, that those who seek life might know the way. May the Spirit help us to be willing to serve, and to see in our neighbor his or her higher self at all times, in all places, and under all circumstances. If we would have fellowship, we must rely on his promises and keep his commandments, which are not grievous. The greatest commandment, that ye love one another, he called a new commandment, and it is still new to many of his followers. We affirm that we want to know God, but do we really mean it? If we are really sincere, will we not be eager to sacrifice our desires, our opinions, and our whims, that the wonders found in the knowledge and understanding of the works of the Creator, our God and Father, may be revealed to us? May we not be willing to endure, that we may be counted worthy to share in the glory to be revealed to those who have given themselves wholly to his service? How easy the way when self is lost in him! How easy to follow when we have been told to use what we have and more will be given. Let us remember the Master's words to Simon. Feed my sheep. None of us can approach the Father with any degree of assurance when we feel and know in our hearts that we are out of harmony with ourselves or others. We are out of harmony with ourselves when we lack faith in ourselves, or when we minimize the power of the God within and forget that all power in heaven and earth is committed to our keeping, if we will attune ourselves to the infinite source of that power. We are out of harmony with others when we think of them as less divine than ourselves, or as possessing less divine power, love, and mercy. Therefore, it is necessary to begin with ourselves to purge our hearts and minds and to become more conscious of the divine spirit within others. This is necessary if we hope to have the fellowship with the Father that will cause us to realize our oneness with him. Prayer and meditation are the essential factors that will keep alive within us this perfect harmony. Are we seeking this fellowship? Would we have God draw nigh unto us? If so, then let us draw nigh unto God, approaching often the throne of grace, with mercy in our hearts. The heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately wicked, that is, the unregenerated heart, the heart that knows not the cleansing of the Spirit, or the awakening of the presence of God. Let us search our hearts. If our heart condemn us, God is greater than our heart, and knoweth all things. He knows our joys and sorrows. He knows how we have tried and, therefore, in spite of our failures, shows love and mercy. If our hearts condemn us not, then we have faith in God, faith that he will keep his promises. Let us be ever ready to forgive. This is the way that God deals with us. He has pardoned our sins and blotted out our transgressions. How much more should we be willing to forgive others? If the thoughts, deeds, or acts of others have caused us pain, let them not be magnified in our own mind or charged to their account. Let us who have pledged our loyalty bear the cross, since we have the promise of the crown. Let us help our fellow human beings by our patience and forbearance and show them that love is a living thing. What great love hath the Father bestowed upon us, that we might show forth his glory among all people. Let us strive to be kind, training ourselves to be considerate of those who do not seem to appreciate it. Yes, be kind when it is the hardest. It is worth the trial, not for the reward we may expect from others, but because we cannot allow anything to mar the fellowship we would have with the Father. One unkind word may not leave a lifelong pang in the heart of another, but it will place us so out of harmony with all that we count worthwhile that its effects will follow us perhaps through many years. Great kindness may be shown through little deeds. One who gives a word of comfort to the disheartened will have one's reward. Though this is a small service, it may help as nothing else would help. Let us not count any good act lost. No seed falls to the ground without the Father's knowledge. It was only a cup of water to the tired master at the well that set the occasion, which brought many out of the city seeking to know more about the water of life. May we lose no opportunity to bind up the broken-hearted, to pour oil on the troubled waters, or to heed the command, comfort ye my people, saith your God. Let us remember that we shall give account for every idle thought, therefore, let us think on those things that make for love for others. As we develop step by step, here a little, there a little, we learn cooperation, we get better acquainted with ourselves, trust more fully in our ideal, have our faith strengthened, gain virtue and understanding, and more become aware of our fellowship with the Father and our duty to others. The Edgar Cayce readings. 3. Our fellowship with God. In Mercury, with both an adverse influence in Mars and a benevolent influence in Uranian sojourn, we find that anger, war, turmoils have played an important experience in even the present sojourn, yet the spiritual influences, in being able to turn within and to rely upon the higher ideals, have saved the entity, as it were, in its search, in its seeking. There have been turmoils and strife from the anger of others, from the disappointments of self, from conditions and experiences that have made for fear at times to creep in, and the wonderments, as of how a loving Father allows one, that tries and tries, to be in a position to suffer so in body, in mind, as in the experience of the entity and those about it at times. Yet, with the application of that which has been held as the spiritual guidance in the sojourn in the earth, there will come that saving grace, that expression that is given by Him who is the author and the finisher of faith, who is the life, who is the way, who is the vine. And ye as the branches, may in Him find that He will abide with them that keep His commandments, and His grace is sufficient unto thee, and will keep and sustain thee even in those conditions that overwhelm thee at times, and bring thee to a greater knowledge and understanding in the light of that service He would have thee render in His vineyard. For the day dawns when the love of the Father is to be manifested more and more among men. Know that thou hast a part in same, and it will be given thee that thou shouldst do. In the selfsame hour, as ye have need of, will it be shown thee. What spiritual advice would be of benefit to this body? That as is held, keep that inviolate, knowing that there must be the ideal set before self that may only be accomplished in the fulfillment of the trusts, as are given from time to time, for the spirit suffers none to be tempted beyond that they are able to bear. Knowing, then, that such is, as to whether one is gratifying selfish interest, or is keeping spiritual faith, walk in that light as is said in Him who gave, follow in that way, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light, for in me is life, and the water of life, for I am the vine and ye are the branches. He that dwelleth in me dwelleth in the Father also. For as ye find in that love one for another, it is taking hold, it is a material manifestation of that love He hath shown. Then as ye attempt to make this spiritual in thy lives, ye may make for a life of beauty, of joy, of worthwhileness, such that others seeing and knowing may take thought and do likewise. Let the love of the Father, as one for another, constrain thee day by day. The entity's application in self also in Venus, as related to those things that become material, has brought and does bring about strange and unusual associations. If this makes for the application of self in its imports of love, as of a divine unit, and not of the secular forces, it will bring also, during the next 2.5 years, the associations wherein there may be the great activities of the entity, and the return to the harmony that has existed in the experience of the entity, and has become in part, at least confusion owing to its attempts to adapt the knowledge at the moment. But peace and harmony are within, and are states of consciousness that bring to the abilities of self those great influences for the use of the metaphysical, as from the vibratory forces of color, of sound, of speech, of place, of environmental forces for the entity's harmony if kept in faith. For when an individual in its applications in self is insecure, in that of certainty owing to material environs, these bring confusion. But the assurance that he meeteth thee in the temple of thine own body, in the quietness of thine own vibrations, if there is brought the oneness of self with the consciousness of the divine within, creates harmony and peace and a certainty that is in the experience of the soul. And though there may be turmoils in the body conscious, though there may be in the physical environs disappointments, the assurance of the oneness of that divine within with the purpose of self in its relationships to thy fellow man brings harmony. Harmony there must be in the experience of the entity if it will accomplish, if it will find rest in itself, if it will bring the best to its fellow man. For as ye meet to thy fellow man, so ye meet to the divine within thine inner self. So may ye find that as will bring into the experience of self a consciousness of the indwelling of the God within. Let the body learn that, he that would have harmony must be harmonious first within his own self, and such radiation from self will bring to the home, to business, to friends, such a peace that brings harmonious contentment, though not necessarily satisfied. But be content with that in hand, and so act, so live, and so manifest harmony through self's action, as to bring that to pass. For what is sown one also reaps. When the act, either by physical deed, implication or word, is such as to put even the question mark as to what is the intent and purpose, dissatisfaction is created. And remember, thoughts are deeds and may become crimes or miracles. Apply that in the relations with the home, and the harmony as is sought will be the outcome. Not with an eye service of, that I may have my own way, or that I may bring others to my own way of acting, or own way of thinking. But let thine thought, thine act, be so in harmony with that of the inner life as to radiate harmony. For when one looks about in all nature of every character, the first law is harmony, and is of divine origin, even as life, and when same is not in accord with that of the creative energy, or God, discord is the result. In the desire to create harmony, physically and mentally, and in relationships with those in the home, in the work, and in other environments, this, of course, the entity must understand and also comprehend. Harmony must first be within self. So long as the activities of others are allowed to upset the body, this produces first inharmony within self. This does not necessarily mean to become indifferent, but in the physical and in the mental and in the spiritual, there is required first the surety within self. Know not only what ye believe, but who is the author of same, not because, merely, this or that may have been said by this or that person, but, according to the true spiritual law, because my spirit beareth witness with their spirit, where two shall agree as concerning anything, they shall ask my Father in heaven and he will do it, that I may be glorified. This was not given merely as something to say, nor to make individuals feel puffed up, or less mindful of the rest, that is, ye shall love one another. These are manners, then, that harmony may be brought. However, the very nature and innate activities create those forces in which there are the inclinations for the entity, in the reverse from love, beauty, nature, to hold little resentments, to become rather of the nature wherein the entity may say in self, yes, I can forgive, but I cannot forget. These must be overcome more and more. For as ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, is the law. Not merely of sacrifice, not merely of recompense, but of grace and mercy, which are so sought for by the entity in the assurances of that, as ye would be forgiven, so must ye forgive. For as ye do it unto the least of thy brethren, ye do it unto thy Maker, is the spiritual law. For, if ye would be forgiven, even as he, then ye must forgive those who have trespassed or may trespass against thee. Though ye may be accused according to man's understanding, or his lack of it, thine own conscience, thine own spirit beareth witness with his spirit as to whether ye are complying with his purpose, his law, day by day. Fellowship with God. The need of the world. Fellowship with God, the need of the world. The crying need among people of all ages has been that individuals must understand themselves, their relationship to their neighbor and to their Maker, and know that they are inseparable. These are one. It is impossible to separate God from his creations, for he manifests through them. It is impossible to love God and hate our neighbors, whose souls are made in the image and likeness of God. Love and hate cannot live in the same heart. Too many of us count fellowship unimportant. Many of us are selfish and are neglecting to let those attributes that reflect fellowship have a place in our lives. If we are making this mistake, we know it, our neighbor knows it, and more than all, the Father knows it. The world is poorer because of the stumbling blocks we have put in the way of others. In this we are not only blocking our own development, but also the very purposes for which we were created. This fellowship with God, of which the world is so much in need, does not simply embrace kindness and gentleness toward friends, but also includes love for enemies. This relationship to God will likewise make us see that to love our enemies does not mean simply to have the right attitude toward them, but rather to have in our hearts a yearning for them to know the way. In their most terrible acts, we can see a power for good misdirected. This attitude will help the world to better understand the obstacles and trials of others, including other nations, since peace on earth and goodwill toward all must first be experienced by the individual before it may be realized among nations. With this knowledge of the need of fellowship, how can we hold a spirit of revenge, dislike, or judgment? Would we dare to bind others by our thoughts? Love and brotherhood, reflections of fellowship with the Father, instilled into the hearts and lives of all, would bring this world into such a happy state that the millennium would be here in deed and in truth. It will be well for us to examine ourselves in order to know whether we as individuals are doing our full part. Are we fulfilling the law of love toward rich and poor, high and few, saint and sinner, friend and foe? There is no better place to practice love for others than in the home. Just watch its effects upon members of the family. If at home we cannot answer kindly, it will be better not to answer at all. It is far better for an angry thought to die unexpressed than for it to kill the good in the life of the speaker, and retard the development of the one to whom it is addressed. The Edgar Cayce Readings. 4. Fellowship with God, the need of the world. And these become then thy mission. Open the door for those that cry aloud for a knowledge that God is within the reach of those that will put their hand to doing. Just being kind, not a great deed as men count greatness, but just being gentle and patient and loving even with those that would despitefully use thee. For the beauties of the Lord are with those that seek to know and witness for him among men. Before that we find the entity was in the Persian land, when there were those experiences of the gatherings of peoples from various lands to the city in the hills and the plains. The entity came as one of those from the Persian land, being then the companion of the warrior for the king at that time. The entity then caught a glimpse of the message of love from the teacher in the city in the hills, and, applying self in the ministry to those who were ill in body and in mind, carried to her own peoples those messages, those tenets, those kindnesses, that gentleness. For as ye will find, as every other entity or soul will find, it is the little things, the gentleness, the patience, the smile, that brings goodness, the spirit of truth, to the hearts and minds of people, not the loud railings or determination. Only gentleness, who is on the Lord's side. And who is thy Lord? These the entity learned, in the name then as Maha. Who gains by being forgiven and by forgiving. The one that forgives is Lord even of him that he forgives. Be ye, then, in that way of in principle and purpose divine. He that holds grudges or pays for those activities that have brought contention in the life, makes the way rough and hard for self, and certainly brings sorrow to him that is life, and without favor with God or man. Know what you believe, what you wish to do, and know that it is not at variance to creative influences, or God. For, if ye hate thy brother, what will it profit thee to gain the whole world? And the brother doesn't mean the son of thy mother. It may be the one that's the farthest from thee, and the greatest persecutor of thine own people. Hate brings that which is irritating, especially to those that are creative in other directions. This body has a good mind, he has a good aptitude for activities with the fellow man. Don't abuse it, use it, as constructive influences. That should be the first mental attitude of the body. Be creative. Think well not only of what you are going to do, or what others can do for you, but more as to what you may do for others. But consider self. It is not always well to hear criticism of self, no more than those who are involved in these activities desire that there be questions as to their purposes. Yet just as with self, when criticism is made of such a nature that it is constructive in its very nature, and a healthy influence, it makes for an attitude not of antagonism, but rather of brotherly love. And notice the place it occupies. Brotherly love is even higher than godliness, and is next to love. The inclination then is to take out on others those little grudges or hates, and such should be eliminated from the entity's self. The entity should refrain from making or drawing comparisons as to others and thus belittling self. Such inclinations should be held rather, not in such a manner as to become stumbling stones, but he that would be the greatest among his associates will be the servant of all, a helpful force in his experience in every manner. Be rather done by all, than ever taking advantage of any individual. For he that overcometh shall wear the crown, and not he that climbeth up some other way. For he becomes the thief, the robber to self of those glories, the knowledge, the peace that comes from making thy will one with creative forces, which is love. Love, as thou hast seen, as thou hast dreamed, yet so little have ye practiced same. For there may have been errors, there may have been miscomprehension of the first causes, yet each that would minister to the needs of a soul in its experience in any environ must, if for self or for the best environ for an entity's experience in the present, hold no animosity, no grudge. But know that what has been is the soul's meeting of its own self in the present. Concerning the advice given that those I hate the most I owe the most to, please explain how this applies to Mr. Husband's cousin and drinking companion, so that I may better understand it. These activities are expressed better possibly in that given by the psalmist, that which I hated has come upon me. That which one hates, because of personal things applies to individualities or personalities. As one learns to eliminate such from the experience, by setting the ideals and letting the hates be as if they were not, one becomes free from hates, thus making better harmony in the life. Each soul in entering an earth's experience does so through the graciousness, the mercy of the living Father, that the soul may become such that it may be in that association, that relation to the creative forces, or the Father which was, is, the will of the Father in bringing such into consciousness in the first or beginning. In entering then, each soul enters with the influences both latent and manifested that have been a part of the experience of the entity. This to be sure includes then relationships with others. Then what is the purpose of each soul entering a material manifestation? That it may be a witness bearer for, and unto the glory of the Father which has been manifested through the Son, even Jesus, in making then those activities through and in which such may be the purpose, the desire of the individual entity. What are peculiarities and what are mine, so that we may adjust our lives harmoniously. These, as indicated, are to be studied in each other, and the peculiarities, the oddities, the errors are to be minimized, not dwelt upon and increased. Minimize rather than crystallize or magnify any faults in the other. Know that thy associations are to be on a 50-50 basis, not 40-60 nor 20-80, but 50-50. And that ye must adjust thyselves to each other's idiosyncrasies or peculiarities. For out of same ye should create that which is thine own in unison, that may make thee a peculiar people, a channel through which the glory of God may be manifested. Each entity, each soul, enters the material experience for purposes. These are not individual or of a selfish nature, though they are very personal in their application and their practice. Each soul meets constantly itself, not alone in what is called at times karma, or karmic influences. For remember, life is God. That which is constructive grows, that which is destructive deteriorates. Then, karmic forces, if the life application in the experience of an individual is made towards constructiveness, it grows and grows. For the individual entity grows to a haven of peace and harmony and understanding, or ye grow to heaven, rather than going to heaven. Ye grow in grace, in knowledge, in understanding. Then, what is the purpose of this entity's experience in this particular phase and time and period? To many the entity is far in advance of its time, its period, it having caught a vision as from the mount, and the vibration, or the sun of light has risen for the entity, only to be shaded by selfish indulgences in the minds of those that have directed, not the entity. Remember then as this, there are promises made by the creative forces or God to the children of men, that if ye will be my daughter, my son, my child, I will indeed be thy God. This is an individual promise. Hence the purposes are for an entrance that the soul may be prepared for an indwelling with the soul, the mind of a living God. Duty of those who have fellowship with the Father. Duty of those who have fellowship with the Father. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. In fellowship there comes a duty to others. There are certain bonds to be kept, and certain laws to be understood and reverenced. Who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands, and a pure heart, such have fellowship with the Father. They delight in his laws and understand and cherish them. Yet many of us may complain that the way is hard, and that the obligations are many and heavy to bear. Are we not judged out of our own mouths? Should we not rather take him at his word and know the truth of his assurance, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light, and that he will place no burden upon us that we are not able to bear? One who sought true fellowship told of the experience in these words, I saw a vision. In it I was able to discover what it meant to be selfish. I beheld myself in the school of life, using what little spiritual food I had for my own benefit. I was sitting on the side of a hill, eating. I soon realized that the ground upon which I was sitting was beginning to crumble. My food was also rapidly diminishing. A voice said, To him that hath not, it shall be taken away from him even that he seemeth to have. Suddenly, I became aware of my destitute position. My food was gone, the earth was receding, and great billows of water were about to overtake me. I arose and began to climb upward, slowly, laboriously. I eagerly sought and accepted help from those I had formerly considered on lower spiritual planes than I. These words came to me, Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap, and all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. That which we think, we become. That which we are, we reflect. That which we reflect, others judge us to be. We may be mistaken in our estimation of ourselves and others may misjudge us, but God looks on the heart and knows all things. He knows our purposes, and what we are capable of becoming. The Master said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church," though he knew that Peter in his weakness would deny him. It is our duty to walk before others in such a manner, that they may see the good within us and thus glorify the Father. It is our duty to be on our guard at all times, lest we lose courage when called into the judgment hall, to give a reason for the faith that is in us. We must see that our fellowship is able to stand the test in every trial, so that no one can point the finger of scorn at us and say, "Hypocrite, even your words condemn you." It is our duty, our privilege, to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the world hath been hid in God, and now is being revealed. The Edgar Cayce readings. 5. Duty of those who have fellowship with the Father. Come, my children, lift up thine hearts that I may enter in. As ye have chosen me, so have I chosen you, that ye may be a blessing to those who seek in my name to know the truth, as may be magnified in their lives through thine aid in me. Grace, mercy and peace is given to those thou askest for in the proportion as thy trust, thy faith, is in me. As ye seek through raising in self that image of love in him, so may thine self be lifted up, and the understanding come to him who seeks for same. How should the group make itself known to those whom it might help? Fear not that thine work will not find an outlet, once there is union of purpose. Has he not said, "Be joyous in that I have chosen thee, as thou hast chosen me, and ye may be lights in my name"? Be of good cheer, for I will stand in the stead of him who puts his trust in me, hath said the Lord, and he is able, and willing, and anxious to do that for those who love the coming of the consciousness of self's being emerged, ruled, controlled by his Spirit. Keep that thou hast kept in thine heart, and make this manifest in the life. In those experiences, as come as those of the influences towards contrary-wise conditions, these make for a tendency to be almost pessimistic from every angle except from love's influence, yet a tendency to drift even when pessimism abounds. Hence the stability, as must be builded by the entity in its crystallization of thought towards mental conditions, material aspects, economic influences, home ties. Duty is the binding word, as it were, to the entity, until it may be lost in love, honor, kindness, peace, tranquility, joy in service, joy for others, disregarding of self's interests in any manner, lost in glorification, lost in the glory as may be shed through that of the influence of reaching upward to that of the entity's ideal. And when there have arisen and do arise those things that to others become duties and obligations from the moral experiences of the earth, the entity has turned and does turn to same, rather with the attitude or the purpose that the love of the creative forces, through the expressions of same, might be made manifest. Then, this makes the obligations or duties, as considered in the minds of some, become rather as a loving experience. As the expression of self in relationships to individuals, causes, purposes that influence groups and even masses of peoples. Duty is well, but the lack of love influence may oft times make for misunderstanding. Cultivate rather that in thy experience with duty. Not as duty alone, but let thy duties always be as opportunities for the expressing or manifesting of that as may be chosen as thy ideal. Have thy ideal, yes, in the material, in the social, in the economic, but above all in the spiritual. For unless all of these, while they are one, are founded upon the spiritual, they will turn upon thee. This indeed is what is meant by that given, "What profited a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what profit a man who lays up treasures where moth and rust do corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal? Rather lay up the treasures in the heart, the love, the spiritual things. For these bring the harmony and peace in the experience of the individual that may become the stay, and that upon which one may rest with when the storms of life come about that are in the experience of all. The law of the Lord is perfect, and it faileth not when ye allow same to be magnified in thee, thy works, thy thoughts, thy deeds. Then hold to the light that is found in the promises of the Christ, what ye ask in my name, believing, and doing my will be answered in thee, if thy purposes, and thy desires are made wholly one with same. These are thy promises not just for others. For until ye have known the Lord thy God as thy God, personally, ye have only heard of truth. Thy appearances in the earth have contributed, do contribute to those conditions which confront thee in the shaping of thy life, thy affairs, thy purposes, thy desires. For as given, life is one. For life is the manifestation of that influence or force called God, and hence is eternal. What, then, will ye present in thy body, in thy mind, as ye grow, as the growth of thy soul, that ye must present before thy Lord, thy God? This, then, is that ye shall live in peace, in harmony first with God's laws, and then ye will find that man's laws are patterned after his laws in such measures, that there is not to be found but good in their relationships to others. Am I using my abilities and accomplishments to the purpose of this entity? Who is to judge but self? Judge not if ye be not judged. Do you measure up to thine own ideals? Do you cast judgments upon others? Answer within self. Who made me a judge of thee? Think not more highly of thyself than ye ought. Not that these are in fault, unless in so doing ye belittle others by comparing them to thine own self, and consider thyself as superior. Then ye are becoming a judge, and belittling others. For ye have not begun to think straight until ye are able to see in the life of those whom ye utterly dislike, something ye would worship in thy Maker. For each sole entity in the earth, with life, whether of this, or that shade or color, or whether this or that disfigurement of body or mind, is in the earth by the grace of God. For he has not willed that any soul should perish, and has thus prepared a way of escape. And ye, as his servant, as the child of the living God, are given the opportunity to contribute to the welfare of any whom ye even consider not quite on par with thy opportunity. Thus if ye belittle others, what sort of a tree will grow in thine own heart? Ye may be sure someone else will belittle thee. That is thy warning, my dear. There are no short cuts to righteousness, and the call is ever that as he gave, a new commandment, that ye love one another, filling the whole purpose of his activity and lesson in materiality. The first was, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy body, thy mind, thy soul, thy neighbor as thyself. This is the whole law. Grace is that ye love one another. With these, then, as thy ideal, set to work to use that thou hast in hand of every nature, to make same manifest in thy associations, thy dealings with thy fellow man. Truth needs not justification, but glorification. In self must come the answer. For the way may appear hard, and as if ye walk alone, but with his promise, his purpose being thy purpose, the yoke becomes easy, the burden light. In the abilities of the entity, and that to which it may attain, and how. As has been seen, there has been builded that in the present that has drawn the entity nearer and nearer to that open door. And, as he has given, he that seeks, he that knocks, shall not be denied that makes the burden easy, nor thy cross light. For my yoke is easy and my burden light, to those who have gained entrance to that kingdom of life and light as is in him. Man only may separate himself from the love of the Father. For, as ye do in thine heart and mind unto others, that is thy measure of the Lord's will with and among men. Make thy will, thy sole activity, then one with his. Ea, the star rises in the east and will direct thy ways to him that is calling, calling, Come unto me, ye that are weak and heavy laden. Ye will find rest unto your souls, for my yoke is easy, my burden light. Wilt the love of the Father and of his purposes with thee in the earth, but guide and direct thee in the things thou thinkest, thou doest, in thine experience. Let there be light in thy soul. Let there be joy in thy heart, as ye come to commune with him and thy loved ones in the earth day by day. As the prayer of the seeker, so is the touch of the body, and body, in the ways that are kept open before the Lord. Let the glory of the coming, then, keep bright in thine inner self, for the light of his countenance will lead and direct thee. Wilt thou but make thy will, thy desire, his desire. Suggest a plan for this inner development, and the correct expression of the results of this development to others. As we may find, through these channels there has come that which is a step-by-step for self-development. Then first in learning to cooperate, in knowing self, in setting the ideal and following in the lines of those thoughts does self-expression come. In knowing the oneness of the Father, in love. And then there will be within self the impelling to make known the joys of life. For, as he has said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, to those that have seen the light. To those that are in darkness, they are crosses, they are burdens, they are stumbling stones. Yet, finding self, find self-expression in same, and give. Even as it has been given unto you, measure ye unto the sons of men, dare to do that as the conscience leads thee to do. One that loves the usage of worldly possessions for the worldly possession realities in physical, rather than for benevolent, or beneficent purposes in same. Yet the love and the big-heartedness of the influence in Jupiter, brings much of this world's goods to the entity, in the disposing of same. Well, then, for entity, to take account of self, and know that to him that haveth, and uses aright, to him, shall be given. To him that haveth, and abuses that privilege, to him shall be taken away, even that he seemeth to have. Is there going to be a great spiritual change immediately following this war? Its effect on economic conditions in this country. That depends upon what you, as millions of others, do about it. Do ye choose that such should be? Do ye choose this as the opportunity, that people shall be warned that the day of the Lord is at hand, and let every man forsake the old ways and cleave to that which is good? This can only be answered in thyself. For, to him that haveth shall be given, unto him that haveth not shall be taken even that which he seemeth to have. Please analyze my development, mentally, spiritually and materially during past 3 months, and advise me what best now to do to further improve my ability, and approach to further my general equilibrium. As has so oft been given, find self and analyze what prompts the impulses in the various directions of activity. Not alone have these been, nor should anyone's activity alone be. For the immediate alone, or for the sustenance even of life as physical alone, but rather know that the self must be guided by that which is ever constructive in the experiences of all who are being guided, aided or contacted through each activity. For unless same is ever constructive in each phase of the activity, it must eventually turn and rend thee. Look into thine whole 7 to 8 years of associations, and see what has been the prompting formula of thine own self in thine associations. To follow the lead, to be guided by the lead, or has it been for self-exaltation, that there might be boastfulness here, there, or in this manner, or that self might be exalted in some position irrespective of who was affected by those activities in other directions? Then, as ye know that like begets like, as ye know what seed ye sow, ye will reap the fruit of that sown. For men do not gather figs from thistles nor grapes from briars. Is 257 conducting his affairs now in a manner approved by the higher forces of all good gifts? This had better be approved within self than attempt to prove or to approve something without, outside of self. If the conscience within self is in line with that the entity holds as its ideal, in its relationships with its associates in every way and manner, then know these are in keeping. For as ye sow, so shall ye reap. This is an infallible, irrefutable condition or experience. And the more one becomes aware of one's obligations to self, to the fellow man, to the relationships, greater becomes one's abilities to deal with others and to succeed. Hence, as has been given, my spirit beareth witness with thy spirit. This then is not a judgment, but rather as an ability for an individual, who would know himself to check upon himself. As to the appearances in the earth, while all are not given, these we find indicate the pattern, indicate that which may be part of the experience. But know that no urge is greater than that of the mental self. For nothing may separate this from the love of God, the Father, save thine own self. For, as ye treat others, ye are treating thy God. The conditions in the activities of the mind and body and soul, know that these are one. The body is using the experience of life well. Keep in that way of the ever-creative influences, and such activities, as are applicable toward individuals, and we will find these will not only give a better outlook, but make for better activity of the mental, of the spiritual, and the results in the physical will be much improved. These are general, yes, but make them specific in that, as ye would that others should do to you, do ye even so to them. Am I justified in feeling that we shouldn't live in the same town with my husband's mother? These should never be the attempt of justification, save by faith. Is the justifying being kept in accord with that which has been given as the fruit of the Spirit? Is it being kind? Because of those conditions which arose, do to others as ye would be done by, for the law of the Lord is perfect. It converteth the soul. And that ye think, that ye devour as it were, that spirit of same ye become. These may be at times confusing, yet keep this as the basis of the experience, or as the measuring stick of all thy experiences, and these will become as stepping stones then for a development towards a more perfect understanding. That the entity or soul, or the animation that makes for the movements of the consciousness of the entity, so long as impelled with or by helpfulness, hopefulness, love, patience, long-suffering, fellowship, kindness, gentleness, is of that creative energy. When turned to those influences that are of a selfish desire, an exaltation of self, these become as canker upon the soul that may eat, that may destroy, that may make for doubts and fears. But a self in any of its experiences is a channel for the expression of the fruits of the spirit of a living animation, a living God, these be growths, these be unfoldments, illuminations in the experiences of the entity. And unless each soul entity, and this entity especially, makes the world better, that corner or place of the world a little better, a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more patient, showing a little more of brotherly love, a little more of kindness, a little more of long-suffering, by the very words and deeds of the entity, the life is a failure, especially so far as growth is concerned. Though you gain the whole world, how little ye must think of thyself if ye lose the purpose for which the soul entered this particular sojourn. Think not more highly of thyself than ye ought to think, yet no one will think more of you than you do of yourself, not in egotism, but in the desire to be of a help. For who is the greatest? He that is the servant of all, he that contributes that which makes each soul glad to be alive, glad to have the opportunity to contribute something to the welfare of his brother. These are thy virtues or thy faults, dependent upon how ye use them. A good lesson here for everyone to learn, who would know the way of the Lord. Be patient, be just, be kind, be long-suffering, show brotherly love, and then don't worry about what's going to happen. But be sure you do these. When you get to the place where you would worry, this is for the entity, stop and pray. For why worry, when you can pray? For God is not mocked, and he remembers thee in thy sincerity in thy purpose. For he, man, has been made just a little lower than the angels, with all the abilities to become one with him. Not the whole, nor yet lost in the individuality of the whole, but becoming more and more personal in all of its consciousnesses of the application of the individuality of creative forces, thus more and more at one with him, yet conscious of being himself. Fellowship brings a peace that passes understanding. Fellowship brings a peace that passes understanding. As we have dealt with our fellow human beings, we may expect to be dealt with. What cause have we for fear if we have obeyed the voice? We have become as little children, putting our trust in the giver of all good and perfect gifts, and we know that he will reward us according to his goodness and mercy. Great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. To whom do we look for this peace? Who hath brought the Pleiades into being, or set the bands of Orion, or the waters of the deep that are cast upon the land, or brings breath into the life of all his creatures, and supplies the union with those creative forces that makes for the songs of the spheres? The Lord is his name. Under the shadow of his wing there is peace and no cause for fear. Let nothing stand between us and the Father, but rather let us cast aside the things that have hindered in the past and allow no care to weigh us down, as we go forth in his name day by day. Do we not know, and are we not confident that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose? There may be things we do not understand now, but those things we can safely leave in the hands of the Father, knowing that he will reveal them in his own good time. Let no worry or condemnation enter our minds that might hinder the fellowship we have with the Father. The time is at hand. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. It is not for us to judge, but to work, to serve, and to rely wholly on the promises. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Let our meditation and prayer be expressed in the following words. How excellent is thy name in the earth, O Lord! Would I have fellowship with thee, I must show brotherly love to my fellow man. Though I come in humbleness and have aught against my brother, my prayer, my meditation, does not rise to thee. Help thou my efforts in my approach to thee. The Edgar Cayce readings. 6. Fellowship brings a peace that passes understanding. Think not of self or of self's own interest, as to satisfying of same, but rather that self may be in every measure faithful to the trust, to the circumstance that has brought about the conditions in the present. And when these have been accomplished, then that as is best, as is correct for those about the body, for the body itself, is and will be accomplished in same. If ye would know him, let thy life and thy experience be that thy deeds and thy acts are the fruits of the Spirit of truth. Against these there is no law. Love, justice, mercy, peace, brotherly love, kindness, these come from the throne of grace, and thine experience of the soul may be from such. But seekest thou that ye may lord thine self above thine brother, above thine neighbor? The answers come only from those sources, those souls that have forsaken his way. And when ye trust in him, ye are sure, and need never be afraid of the material things. 4. Does he not feed the birds of the air? Does he not give the color to the lily, the incense to the violet? How much more is that as may be in his very presence, if ye apply self to become worthy of acceptance in his home. In seeking such information, one would do well to understand what premise the existent conditions that are as personalities, or latent in the individuality of the entity. And why, or what caused those conditions to be existent in the experience of the entity as an entity. Would one, if one would, review those lessons, as have been compiled and preserved throughout the ages of man in his reasoning relationships with the creative energy, or God, his relationships to God and God's relationships to man, one would see how that individuals were called for definite purposes through that they, the individuals, had builded in their own experience. And how that such individuals in a life's experience faltered or failed to keep that purpose for which they were brought into being by the acts of their own will, that which makes man in the relationship, as does exist. That given man that he might become a companion with the Father, the Son, and the holy angels, and the entities that might dwell in peace and with him. When such individuals faltered, then those things of which the flesh is heir to beset them, in man's terminology, with ills, evil companions, and hatred was bred, and enemies seemed to compass about. When such an individual turned again, and sought the face of the Father, sought for forgiveness, pled his own cause, as has ever been promised, the Father heard, even though afar off. And there came into being in the physical understanding, the mental body, the imaginative body, the physical body, that as was sought for. Then man went so far away in the concepts of his own wisdom, that those things became as natural consequences in the lives of individuals. And man bethought himself as a creator by aping even creative forces, which, used in a material sense, brought then even to his own destruction. Then the pity, the love, still, for the Creator, for that created, ever dominant in the heart and soul, that the cry went up for that continued establishment of the access to the Father, even as was promised to his servant David. Then the entrance into the world of the Prince of Peace, that they who found in him that way, that light, that water, that brother that gave them the access to the throne of grace itself, might have those errors forgiven, and remembered no more, save as has been given, that those things that so easily beset and the dog returns to the vomit and the hog to his wallow. Then, those things that are existent in the experience of an entity, from its advent into the material plane, where there becomes physical, third-dimensional manifestations of this divine love, what an individual does about such knowledge, such relationships, becomes the inclinations, the desires, the wishes of the heart. For thy speech often betrayeth thee. For of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. And all nature hath been tamed, but the tongue hath no man tamed. It may be stilled in the earth, but that it has spoken goes on, and builds, or is retarded, by that way as has been prepared for those who would seek his face. Do keep the mental attitude as to being creative. Not condemning. Not hating. But in that way of a helpful force for others.